Hello everyone, Prince 1215 here with another review, another Star Wars review, and instead of looking at Andor this week, we're going to be looking over Tales of the Jedi, a very quick, easy, and digestible 6-episode miniseries that has launched on Disney+. So yeah, I think next week will be the next Andor review because the story is going in some really interesting places, and actually the episode from this week, I think it's probably my favorite so far, and this is really the episode that's got me going, okay, this show is amazing now. But I feel like I want to watch one more and then really have a lot of stuff to dig into with that. So instead, we'll talk about Tales of the Jedi today. So kind of fortuitous that worked out that way. So yeah, they announced this and I was pretty excited because I remember earlier this year I'd kind of been thinking to myself, it would be really, really cool if we got more of Dooku's backstory. There had been a book that wasn't even really a proper book. It was like the script of an audio drama that I can't remember if they even produced. I think it was like they produced the script for the audio drama, but they didn't do the audio drama, so they released the script or something. I can't remember. But yeah, so I was thinking to myself, well, it'd be really cool to look at more of Dooku's past and everything. And then they announced the Tales of the Jedi thing, and Dooku is one of the 2 Jedi that they focus on here, which is really, really cool. So yeah, 6 episodes. It takes like an hour and a half to get through all of them, if that. So that's maybe even being stretching it a little bit, because there's really not a whole lot to them in terms of runtime. Now, in terms of themes and story, there's actually a lot to dig in here, even though they're all pretty short, because I don't think a single one goes past like 15, 16 minutes, something like that. And, part of that's even like the credits and stuff, because Disney Plus always has like an extra 5 minutes of credits. So, yeah. I guess I'll just go in order here really quick, talking about them. The first one, I also not going to remember most of the names of these, so I'll just go by. The first one is Ahsoka as a baby. This is when it's realized that she has Force-sensitive powers. She, as the Elder says at the end, Ahsoka is Jedi. Interesting note, Gina Kavankar, who was Iden Versio in Battlefront 2, she is now voicing Ahsoka's mom. Imagine getting that call, hey, we want you to come back to Star Wars, but we don't want you to be Iden Versio again. We want you to be Ahsoka Tano's mother. I bet she flipped out, because I know she's a huge Star Wars fan based on all the press she did for Battlefront 2. So she does a good job with what she's given. It's not a meaty role. It's very, very simple. But, she didn't sound like Iden. She sounded like a whole new character, which I appreciate whenever they do bring actors back to play different characters in Star Wars. Good episode. I mean, it's really... I almost got like Gennady however you say his last name, Tartakovsky or whatever vibes, from the Clone Wars micro-series, is that there wasn't a whole lot of dialogue. It was pretty simple, just some action, and not even like action. It's a really pretty simple short, just showing, how everyone realizes that Ahsoka has Force-sensitive powers by her connection to nature and taming that saber-toothed tiger beast thing. So yeah, pretty short, sweet, simple all around. It's cool seeing Ahsoka's parents, because, like most of these characters, we don't see where they come from, their parentage, what planet they were born on and everything, because most, like Obi-Wan and Yoda and Mace Windu, it's like we don't... I think in the EU we had some of those answers, but in canon we don't. So it's like, oh, hey, we actually get to meet one of these Jedi's families that, of course they get whisked away to Coruscant and they never meet ever again, most of the time. So that was interesting. Yeah, it's really... I liked it. It's really all I have to say about the first one. It's pretty simple. The second one, starting to get a little bit more meat on the bone here. It's Jedi Knight Dooku and his young Padawan, Qui-Gon Jinn, stopping this kind of... They've been sit there because a senator's son has been held hostage, but the people holding the son hostage aren't really the ones in the wrong, because the senator has been not treating his planet and his people very well, and this is really digging into the idea of the corruption of the Republic was not well off, and that's how Sidious was able to rise to power in the first place, is he was able to feed off all of the corruption. So pretty cool to see young Dooku here. He's not a count. He hasn't taken on that title of the Count of Sereno yet. Um, he's still part of the Jedi Order and everything. And yeah, just the short little I am a Jedi. I am the highest authority here until the senator shows up, but even then he states correctly that the Jedi aren't supposed to be serving the Senate. They're supposed to be serving the citizens of the Republic, which is a problem as we get later on into more closer to the Clone Wars and everything. That's something that Jedi don't necessarily, their mission statement has shifted, and Dooku actually, for all of his faults of being evil later on, he did recognize that and admit that there is a problem here. So him standing against the corrupt senator and going, your corruption is the problem with the galaxy and everything, and dipping into his darkness and almost killing him before Qui-Gon stopped him. That was really cool to see. And it's like these are it was a very Anakin Skywalker-esque moment where you see the small moment of darkness in there, and unlike Anakin, Dooku had someone to stop him in that moment. But a lot of times with Anakin and his little small dips towards the dark side, he's alone. He doesn't have anyone to stop him, like slaughtering the Tusken Raiders or interrogating Paga the Lesser to find out how the brain worms work in season 2. So it's interesting to kind of see, and we'll talk more about parallels here in a second. The parallels between Anakin and Dooku's fall to the dark side. So yeah, I just another interesting ideas going on here. It's like, honestly, they could have, because these are all so short, I don't even know if they really needed to split these up into 6. It could have just been like 2 specials, and it's like skipping along the timeline of these 2 characters. They didn't. I don't really. That's maybe my one complaint, is like, why is this 6 and not 2? Because I think it'd make a little bit more sense. Like, I think because if you put it together, it'd probably be like an episode of Clone Wars skipping around the timeline for both of these characters, close to when you take out the credits and everything, and you just have the scenes in there. So yeah, then we skip forward, and it's a little later. It's still before Phantom Menace here. Dooku and Jedi Knight Mace Windu, again, interesting to see. He's not even a Jedi Master yet. He's still Knight Windu. Going to Raxus. I don't think it was Raxus Prime, though. I think it was another planet in the system, because they called it something different, like Raxus 9 or something like that. But it's clearly in the Raxus system because the architecture I recognized from Clone Wars and Bad Batch. So that was really cool. This is like, oh, hey, and also by the end of it, it's kind of starting to give Dooku some connections to Raxus, to why it ended up becoming the capital of the Confederacy. So, yeah, another corrupt senator, another dead Jedi investigation, which, thanks to Clone Wars, we have 1 or 2 of those. One of them even being in not finished episodes. So it's cool to see Mace Windu. Really, I think this episode this short did a lot for Dooku's character, of course, because he's kind of the focus of it. But I feel like it did a lot for Mace Windu's character as well. And the statement of Dooku going, you abide by the rules so closely, and that kind of being one of Windu's character traits, because that's something that's been stated about Windu's character before, is that he's kind of a stickler for rules and everything. But in a lot of his appearances, I don't really necessarily get that. He just seems like, it's like Mace Windu doesn't really have much of a personality. It's maybe a hot take there. He doesn't really have too much of a personality besides being just kind of a stereotypical, stick in the mud character. Is like, he tries to do, he's obviously a good guy. He's fighting for the light and trying to help people and everything. But I don't know. I've just never really gotten he is a stickler for rules and will always follow the rule book by the book, and will do his best never to stray from it. I've never really gotten that from Windu's character, even though I know I've seen that written out in descriptions of this is what his character is before. So it was interesting for Dooku to actually say, it's like, oh, you're such a stickler for rules. And it's like, oh yeah, I guess he is. And we actually saw that here because there were a lot of moments here where he was going, well, we need to do this by the book. And it's like, well, hold on a second. We should probably go back to the council with this before we continue. Where Dooku was doing more the Anakin Skywalker thing of, just move around. It's like, we're still following our mandate, but, we're just going to skirt the edge of it a little bit. And it's like, oh, look, they're volunteering to take us to where the Senator and the Jedi were ambushed. So it's like, they've invited us. We might as well go before reporting into the council. So it's really interesting to see that side of Dooku. And it's like, oh, so maybe that's where Qui-Gon got some of his tendencies. And then he didn't necessarily pass that on to Obi-Wan, but as it turns out, Anakin picked up a lot of those kind of naturally, and Obi-Wan had it's like Obi-Wan ended up kind of with a mini version of his master as his apprentice almost, with how Anakin skirts around the rules and defying the council for the greater good and everything. Except Anakin kind of does it more for selfish reasons a lot, but anyway. So yeah, that was interesting. It was cool to see like the seeds of the separatist movement, the very early foundations here of the Confederacy of Independent Systems, and like Dooku kind of being inspired politically, because he's like, I don't agree with your methods, but you're kind of right. The Republic does kind of suck a little bit. And then it seems like almost he was, he said to that guy, it's like, we'll talk again. We're gonna meet again. And so that was interesting. So yeah, really good one. This maybe my favorite. Is like I feel like I like the Dooku ones more than the Ahsoka ones, which I'll get into here in a minute. So yeah, I think that might have been my second favorite one. But the next one, which is the name I actually remember of this one, is the next short is the Sith Lord, and this is my favorite. This is my favorite of the bunch. For one, we actually get to see Yaddle, because she's a character that just kind of vanished. We don't know much about Yaddle. She was there in Phantom Menace in the background, never spoke. She spoke in a deleted scene, but in terms of acting, it's like we've had this discussion before, where it's like how many deleted scenes count towards canon and which ones don't, because there's some deleted scenes that contradict later canon things, so obviously that deleted scene doesn't count at all. But then there are others that are like some of the Shock T things from Revenge of the Sith, those maybe do count as canon. So it's like, we really never really seen much of Yaddle is the point. And so it was really cool to see her here, even if it was for a brief moment. Voiced by Bryce Dallas Howard, which was cool. She's done a surprising amount of Star Wars stuff, and you can't tell it's her. I was really just expecting Claire Dearing from Jurassic World to come out of Yaddle's mouth, but that it doesn't sound like her at all. So maybe she's got like a secret voice acting career ahead of her. Maybe she could be like the next Mark Hamill or something. In terms of, her, you initially know her for her on-screen stuff, but then it's like, oh, wow, she's got a surprising list of voice credits, too, and you wouldn't know that was her. So really, really good job on her part. It immediately helped you connect with Yaddle. She was kind of disillusioned with the Jedi Order a teensy bit, and the Count, she actually resigned her position before her death, right before. She's trying to help Dooku because she thinks, it's like, hey, we're on the same side here. But she actually, one of those early figures that uncovers the conspiracy of Palpatine and what he's trying to do and everything, and almost comes close to unraveling it, but it was, of course, snuffed out just before she could do so. That's it. That's cool to see, and it's tragic because it's like, oh, she actually did care about Dooku, and then it's like, wait, we're going to find out what happened to Yaddle. Also, I thought cool to see Dooku actually going in and deleting the information using Sifo Dyas's codes and everything. And, to hide Camino and all that. It's like, oh, hey, we're actually getting to see that, because it was like, I don't think it's ever plainly out loudly stated in Attack of the Clones that Dooku is the one that did that. However, it's highly inferred. Yeah, he's the one that did that, and I think everyone's taking that as like, oh yeah, it had to have been Dooku. because he knows about the clones and everything. So it just makes sense. So to actually see him do that, it's like, oh wow, it's like that was actually kind of a visceral betrayal as he's walking around everyone and they have no idea what's going on. And also interesting to think that this is happening at the same time. Ow! I just bit my tongue. Uh, this is happening at the same time as the Phantom Menace. So Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan and young Anakin Skywalker are like upstairs reporting to the council as Dooku is doing this, and then he actually meets Qui-Gon again, and they have what ends up being their final goodbye. Not that either of them realized it. And then we skip forward a little bit, and then it's like right before and man, Palpatine is such a snake. I love Ian McDiarmid coming in to voice Palpatine here, and he is using his Senator / Chancellor Palpatine voice, and not really his Sidious voice, because he's trying to be nice to Dooku. It's like, oh hey, it's unfortunate some things happened, but that's just the way things are. And it's like we're trying to better the galaxy here. We're trying to improve it, I say, as I'm wearing a dark and scary cloak to hide my face. But then when it does come to Yaddle discovering them, and it kind of ended up being Dooku's test, the way Dooku ended up being a test later for Anakin, then you do hear the destroyer or kill or whatever. It dips and he dips into the Sidious voice, and then he cackles. It's like Palpatine enjoying himself being evil is just one of my favorite things about Star Wars, because Ian McDiarmid just loves chewing the scenery. And even when, or just Palpatine really, Palpatine just always chews the scenery, because it doesn't really matter who's playing him in the moment. He always, they always do such a good job of portraying Palpatine just being this, this evil person, and enjoying being an evil person. Because even Ian Abercrombie, that voiced him for most of Clone Wars, like, when he goes to Mandalore to fight Maul and Savage because there can only be two, the little cackles he's giving and the big old smile on his face as he's fighting them on Mandalore and Sundari and everything, it's like, he's such an evil character. He just loves what he does so much. It's like, I love watching that. So the little cackle he's as Dooku and Yaddle are fighting is so good. But this is almost like the most this has like the most obvious themes going on here, because you think Yaddle gets crushed by the door, and I thought that was it. I thought she was done. I'm like, oh well, that's how it happened. She gets crushed by a big door, and then Dooku falls to his knees, and then I really thought that we were going to have a moment where Palpatine goes, because he says, it's like, you've done well, my apprentice. That is the moment where they both realize that, okay, Dooku is Sidious's new apprentice, and Dooku realizes that Sidious is his new master. And I really thought we were going to have henceforth you shall be known as Darth Tyrannus. I really thought we were going to have that little moment to mirror Vader later on, but then, and that may have actually happened, but then it gets interrupted by Yaddle using the Force to lift the door. She's still there, and you hear the Force theme for the one and only time in the shorts of the power of the light side of the Jedi, and especially a member of Yoda's species. And it's like, and it almost was like a little cartoon, and it's an animated short, but the clone, Star Wars animation hasn't really been cartoony like Looney Tunes. It's always used like realistic physics and stuff for the most part. It just happens to be animated, but this was almost cartoony and more comic booky almost, which I guess kind of makes sense considering Star Wars does so much with mythology and all this, of where Yaddle opens the door, and the symbolism of her bathed in light and Dooku stuck in the middle and Palpatine being in the shadows, and then reeling back. I loved that. Like I said, almost a little too cartoony, but I still loved it, of him covering his face with his sleeve or whatever, so that way he's not being overcome by light, and also so Yaddle doesn't see his face and everything. But it was almost like a vampire where the light is hurting him. It's like, oh, that was so good. And you hear the It's like it's so I was like cheering. I was like, this is so cool. But then it's too much for her. She's not strong enough, and Yaddle succumbs and is unable to stop Dooku as he finally slips all the way to the dark side and ends up killing her. And that is the end of Yaddle and the short. And we know now how Dooku became Darth Tyrannus. Yeah, I just loved this short so much. It's like, that was just so cool. It just really digs in well to the character complexities that Star Wars has going on, and when it's done well, boy, can it really be done well. So yeah, that was really cool. That's definitely my favorite, hands down, short of the bunch. The next one is Ahsoka Training with Clones. It's honestly maybe even more than when Ahsoka, when she's a baby, probably even more simpler than that one. This may be in terms of story, the simplest one of the bunch, because it's just a training montage, really, and it's the big, the whole message of it is, this is Anakin trying to teach her and protect her, because she's like, oh, I can fight battle droids. And it's like, yeah, I know, it's not, it's organics and regular people that I'm more concerned about. So I mean, there's not really there's even less story here in terms of actual plot than in when Ahsoka was a baby, because that was just like, oh look, it's Ahsoka, it's a baby. Oh look, she has the Force, and that's kind of simple. This is even more simpler because it's just fighting, training. It's a training. It's a Ahsoka training montage, the short, basically, but it still ends on that note of you see her progression of Anakin training her and Rex and the clones helping out and everything. And it's like, Filoni, you didn't have to do it with the extra little gut punch. It's like, I figured that, because it's like, we see, because some of the moves she's doing to block the stun blast are the same moves we saw her use during Order 66. So it totally makes sense for it to end with that shot of them going into the hangar in the last episode of Clone Wars. And, showing it's like, yeah, that all the training did pay off because it helps her to survive, and Anakin, unintentionally creates this big thorn in his side for much later on. Why Ahsoka is such a capable warrior and helps out the rebellion so much later, in its early years. And so, but the just extra little gut punch of a first training session. She's knocked out. She comes to. And Rex says, "Oh yeah, Jesse over there really nailed you." And you hear the "Sorry, Commander," out of focus from Jesse in the background. Even it seems like before the 501st started painting their armor. You didn't have to do that, Filoni. You didn't have to do that, but you did do it. And I'm upset, but I'm also not upset because you did it. It's like, it just hurts so much more, because then it's like, Jesse really tagged you there. It's like, "Sorry, Commander," and he feels kind of bad about it. It's training and everything. But then you skip forward about 3 years, then he's trying to kill them both because of a inhibitor chip in his head. It's like, thanks, Sidious. You're a real jerk, but you know that. You enjoy that. So yeah, really good short. It was really cool to see the redone designs from like early seasons of Clone Wars. Like Ahsoka has new training garb that's like in between her season 1 and 2 outfit. The clones all have updated armor. It's not the old. It's obviously inspired by that original, character model of what the clones looked like back in season 1 and 2 and first half of season 3. Actually all of season 3. But they've done more with it. The shoulder pads aren't just all completely like one. Everything looks a little closer to the way they do in their movies. The not the shoulder pads. That wasn't what I was trying to talk about. The elbow pads, because like if you notice in seasons 1, 2, and 3 of Clone Wars, all of the elbow pads and the clones are like stuck together are stuck in the arm vambrace. And they actually used that in Cloak of Darkness or Cloak of Deception, whatever the name of that episode is, where Newt Gunray is held captive aboard the Jedi cruiser with Luminara and Ahsoka, and Ventress comes to get him out. And Captain Argaius, the turncoat, he actually uses that character model piece because the Senate Commando is just the clone trooper armor with a different helmet colored blue. and so he actually uses the elbow pad being fused into the arm piece to hit the button to deactivate the cell on the force field on Gunray's cell. So that's so I think that's really funny and interesting that first three seasons, that's how it was, because this was the first, Clone Wars is the first thing Lucasfilm Animation had ever done. Then seasons 4, 5, 6, 7, you get the phase 3, or excuse me, the phase 2 clone armor, and they can move around a little bit more. You see more joints in the armor, including the elbow pads and everything. And so now that we've gone back and we're doing phase 1 clones again in this short, you see that they've really given them the workaround. It's like this is probably how they wanted them to look in the first place and not be as cartoony, a little bit more realistic. And it's really cool to see that evolution of the Clone Wars style, including Obi-Wan and Anakin, because Obi-Wan and Anakin look so much more like Hayden Christensen and Ewan McGregor in this short, that to the point where it's almost jarring. I really would have wished that they would have just like touched up the original models, because seeing Anakin, that Clone Wars Anakin, but with the much shorter hair, which then you get to the season 3 look of him later in that one when the change in the hair being longer is much more drastic compared to the way it actually worked when the show was airing. There's an obvious growth there to where we get the episode 3 Anakin hair. But then Obi-Wan, it's like, Obi-Wan, I almost don't like the look of him, because I'm like, and then and he still has the Attack of the Clones mullet and everything. It's like, I really could have just reused. This may be. I love the Clone Wars season 1 through 3 Obi-Wan character model. I think that's a really good look for Obi-Wan. Yeah, his hair is orange instead of being more of a tan brown like it's supposed to be. But I just love that look for Obi-Wan so much. I just think that's a really good look for Obi-Wan. Obviously based on the micro series look with the clone armor and everything. And that's partly why the hair was orange there, because his hair was colored orange in the micro series. Because all their designs are based on the micro series 2D models, actually. And you look at Dooku, and that's very obvious. He's got that really long, sharp edges to him in both versions. But yeah, no, I could have done without them touching on Obi-Wan, especially for such a short appearance there. But it's probably one of those, like, this is how we really wanted him to always look kind of deal, and we just couldn't get there because of how early our animation was at the time. And we were all learning and stuff. So it's like, I get it. I've done stuff like that myself as a creative person. So I get it. But yeah, no, really good short. Pretty good. And then we get to the next one, which is a good short, but people are going to have a problem with this. And I even sort of going to have my own problem with it. But, is that, this last one is Ahsoka on the run. She's, just trying to survive, not being in the fight. She's, just trying to live a life. And then, of course, her past comes calling. An Inquisitor shows up. She has and it's like, just shows how well trained Ahsoka is. That, this is an Inquisitor, one of the last, Force users in the galaxy, really, that's somewhat trained. And Ahsoka dispatches him very, very quickly. And then that's when she becomes Fulcrum and starts helping out the early days of the rebellion. Not really much to that, except I would call this one just fine and move on. And it is a good short and everything, and it gets its point across. But there's so much more. It's like, oh wow, there's really some interesting ideas here. I wish you could expound on that and maybe do like a full episode of Clone Wars or something with this. It's like, why? It's like, it feels almost like too short or truncated or something. Now, if only we could have a longer version. Oh, wait, there is a longer version of it that exists. It's called the Ahsoka novel from E.K. Johnson that came out in like 2016, 2017, something like that. So, yeah, that's going to be controversial amongst people, because this short basically retroactively makes that book a non-canon, because of the changes it makes. And they're not, and it's like, it's still the same basic story in terms of when you look at the bullet points, but it's the small little things that are different that render that book non-canon. which for a lot of people, including myself, was kind of annoying because at this point, I think it's clear that Dave Filoni, being the student of George Lucas, he treats the expanded material like the books and comics the same way George did, which it's cool that they're there. We can use them for inspiration, but they don't necessarily count. If we can tell a story using inspiration from that, then great. But if we have a different idea for a story that would then override that, then we're just going to override that. And he's done that a lot with his own characters because we've already seen that with Kanan and his introduction in Bad Batch and that overriding his comics. And now he's done, and the Ahsoka novel was already sort of kind of called a little bit into question with the connections to Clone Wars and everything. But those were a little bit more, you could hand wave that a little bit going, because if I remember correctly, because I've read the book, I have it. If I remember correctly, like Clone Wars flashbacks are in a dream. So that could be, Ahsoka misremembering or the dream being changed and heightened because it's a nightmare and everything of this memory, and so she's not remembering it correctly because it's a dream, and that happens. But yeah, no, at this point there is no going back. That novel is non-canon, and it's annoying. And I think the same thing can be said with Cobb Vanth and Freetown and everything from The Mandalorian, where they've clearly taken inspiration from that, but they didn't. But they did their own version. They didn't follow it completely with where to get Boba's armor back from and everything. And I appreciate that they even went to the trouble of keeping Cobb Vanth and not just throwing him out completely and going, oh yeah, we are going to keep this character, which is just not going to be. It's the story that is just not going to be exactly 100% what you know from the Aftermath trilogy. So it's good that they do that, where if there is a story out there, and in most most of these times that this case has happened where they've overridden something, it's not been a complete 100% override. They have still kept elements of it there. They've just changed it slightly, and so I think that still does show a lot of respect for that material, where they treat it as like groundwork and they go from there to make it fit the rest of the visual media. And I get that, but at the same time it's like, well, then why did you bother getting rid of the EU in the first place if we're just back to this, where because that was the problem when Clone Wars was first airing. Of course the EU wasn't erased and completely because Lucas was still at the helm. And it was pretty clear what his stance was, but it was still like, oh, is the EU canon, is it not? And people, and especially like in 2009, 10, 11, there were some novels out there that were really trying to kind of put a round, a round block into a square hole and trying to make it fit, where it's like, okay, well, we can kind of explain away it this way. I think there's even a Clone Wars novel by Karen Travis where Captain Pelion is mentioned, who's of course Thrawn's right hand in the Thrawn trilogy. So it's like there was mixing and matching of throwing some stuff in there, trying to make it work. But then there was like major things where Mandalore is a completely different planet from the way it's described in the Republic Commando novels, and all and like characters die and way different points from where we knew them. Barriss Offee turns evil. So that was kind of an issue at the time, and then of course Disney happened and the EU was taken out, and when they did that, they were like, hey, it's like we're doing this for a cohesive continuity between everything. There's not supposed to be any more guessing of what is canon and what is not. This is now going to be a cohesive universe, and we're going to move forward, and everything is going to matter: books, TV, movies, games, etc. And unless it's like a Lego thing, or we strictly say this is a just fun side story that is not supposed to be canon, everything from this hard reset point out is canon. And while that's still technically true, because this last short retells the story from the Ahsoka novel, and I guess if you want more details, you could just go there to see a slightly different version. It's it's very annoying that we're back to here with the EU, to where it's like, okay, so are we going to end up with another 3 stories of how the rebels got the Death Star planes? I mean, obviously that's not going to happen because they've made a whole movie about that, and that's a really big, thing. But it wouldn't surprise me if somewhere down the line we get something that like overrides, and even more novels and stuff. Like, it would not, so for instance, it would not surprise me if in the Bad Batch we see Caleb Doom show back up again, and he meets young Hera, and then we see like teenage versions of them, grab the ghost and go on the run together for the first time, which would override the A New Dawn novel that was like it was the first or second new canon novel that came out and was supposed to set the groundwork for Rebels. And like Dave Filoni sent, but I mean, that's the problem, is that Dave Filoni sanctioned that, but he also sanctioned the Ahsoka novel, and he gave like all these plot details to E.K. Johnston to write about. And it's like, hey, here's what happens at the end of Clone Wars, and you can kind of go from there. And this is kind of the way I want this story to be told. She went, okay, and she went off and she wrote that story and everything. And now, a couple years after the fact, Dave Filoni has gone, okay, you know what? We're going to retell that exact same story, but in a very truncated time frame, to where it kind of loses a little bit of its nuance, and just to get, it's like, I kind of wish that this last one had been something different, because I feel like the Dooku stuff. Yeah, but even then, it seems like some of this Dooku stuff is even maybe overriding some of like that, like that one from earlier I mentioned, the book, or the book that was the teleplay of the audio drama or whatever. It seems like maybe even the Dooku things override that, which is unfortunate. So it's like it's just starting to get a little, okay, we need to take a step back. Where's that story team that we're supposed to? It's like Pablo Hidalgo, Leland Chi. Hey, you guys need to be checking in on this stuff. I know Dave's brilliant, but it's real annoying if we're overriding things now, and we're just back to where it's not even been. It's been 8 years since the EU was done away with. Are we just going to have a hard reset? Are we just going to need to do a hard reset on all the expanded material every 8 years or something like that? So, anyway, so yeah. I mean, so yeah, Last Short, it's good if you've never read the Ahsoka novel. If you've read the Ahsoka novel, then it's kind of infuriating, because it's just the same story but told worse. Because it's truncated in a shorter time frame. And also the Inquisitor that's there, it looks, based on the descriptions from the Ahsoka novel, I'm pretty sure looks nothing like the sixth brother, and I think it's supposed to be the sixth brother, but he looks nothing like the descriptions. But anyway, so I mean, I could really go on about that forever, but it is kind of what it is, and we just have to accept it. Yay. So anyway, so yeah, that'll pretty much be it. For the most part, with the problems with the last one and continuity aside, I really enjoyed all of these. I thought they were really good. I would love if they do more and they focus on like other Jedi, like do one that focuses on Yoda or something, and it shows the early days of, not the early days, because that would probably remove too much of the mystery, but some of the early days of Yoda, and bring in Frank Oz to do it, since Tom Kane is forcibly retired from the role now, unfortunately, because of his stroke. I would love I would love some of Qui-Gon. That would be really cool. I mean, it seems like Liam Neeson's open to coming back to the role. He's always been open to coming back to it, because he did it for Obi-Wan and he did it for Clone Wars before then. So it's like, yeah, give Qui-Gon some standalone episodes. It's like, first adventure with him and Obi-Wan when it's like when Obi-Wan's 10 years old or something. That'd be cool. So yeah, I'm definitely open to them doing more of these. It's just hopefully they don't start overriding more things. So yeah, anyway, that'll pretty much be it for this review. A good little talk here about Star Wars. It's I like that we can have all these different projects. Andor's off doing its thing and being really good. Now we have Tales of the Jedi also. Kind of it's a nice little appetizer, I think, for Bad Batch season 2, which won't start until next year. So yeah, I really enjoyed these, and I hope we get more. And especially the Clone Wars art style. I'm always up for more things in the Clone Wars art style, because I know when Clone Wars first started, people were like, oh, it looks just like the action figures, blah blah blah. But it's really changed and evolved, and as they've gotten better, it's like it really has become its own very recognizable style. And there is no other show or shows at this point rather that look like Clone Wars or Bad Batch, and I just really like that, and I think that's cool. So I'm definitely up for more things, with the more stories told with the Clone Wars art style. So yeah, that will be it for this review. So thank you so much for watching. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, all that great stuff. Remember to follow me on Twitter and Instagram. Those links are in the description below. And I will probably be back next week with another Andor review. Until then, I will see you guys later. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.